I was standing on the front steps of a house I helped furnish when my daughter-in-law opened the door just wide enough to look at me the way you look at something that has overstayed its welcome. The October air in Barrie was sharp and clean, the kind of cold that reminds you summer has quietly packed its things and left without saying goodbye. I was holding a container of butter tarts. I had spent the better part of the afternoon making my mother's recipe, the one with the runny centers and the golden pastry edges that used to make my son's whole face change when he was small. I had imagined setting them down on a long table surrounded by noise and warmth. Instead, I was looking at a door barely open and a smile that did not reach a single part of my daughter-in-law's face. "Oh," she said, drawing the word out slowly, as if she needed a moment to compose something. "We thought you had decided not to come." I had not decided anything of the sort. My son had called me on Thursday and said Thanksgiving dinner, Sunday at 5, bring something sweet. I had written it on the calendar in the kitchen. I had driven 40 minutes through traffic on the 400 to be standing exactly where I was standing. "He told me 5 o'clock, I said. She tilted her head slightly. Behind her, I could hear voices and laughter and the sound of a playlist I did not recognize. The house smelled like roasted something, garlic, warmth, a life in full swing. "Tonight is more of a couples thing," she said, keeping her voice low, almost gentle. The way people sound when they are trying to make something unkind seem reasonable. "His friends from the office are here with their partners. I just think, and I have been meaning to say this, I think you need to start building a life that does not revolve around us. It starts to feel like pressure, like we owe you something, and honestly, that energy is a lot to carry." I heard the words. I understood each one individually, but together they arranged themselves into something I was not prepared for, not on a Sunday evening in October, not on a doorstep where my grandchildren had drawn chalk animals on the concrete the summer before last. I do not remember what I said, if I said anything. I remember the door closing. I remember the butter tarts in my hands, the container slightly warm from the oven, still holding heat I had put into it. I remember walking back to my car without looking up at the windows. I remember the drive home feeling very long. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Innisfil, the porch light was already on from the timer. The house greeted me the way it always did when I returned alone, quiet, familiar, asking nothing. I set the butter tarts on the counter and did not eat any of them. I stood in the kitchen for a while without turning on the overhead light, just standing there in the light from the range hood, thinking about what she had said. Not with anger yet, but with the slow, methodical turning of something that needed to be properly understood. Energy is a lot to carry. I was 64 years old. I had worked 31 years as a registered nurse at Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre. I had raised my son alone after his father, and I separated, working overnight shifts and weekend doubles to keep his hockey registration paid and his school supplies stocked. I had never asked to be carried. I had been the one doing the carrying. I walked to the small desk in the spare bedroom, the one I used for paperwork, and I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a green binder I had started 2 years ago, when the e-transfers first became regular enough to track. I had been meticulous about it, the way nurses are about documentation, because something in my chest had always known, even when my mind was still making excuses. I carried the binder to the kitchen table and sat down under the overhead light I finally switched on. I opened it from the beginning. The first transfer had seemed reasonable. My son had just started his job at the engineering firm in Toronto, and the cost of living had surprised him. $400 for groceries, just until the first full paycheck. I remembered feeling glad I could help. Then it was $800 for the first and last month on a parking spot near his office. Then a contribution toward the security deposit on the house in Barrie when he and my daughter-in-law decided to buy instead of rent. Then the RESP contributions for my grandchildren, which my daughter-in-law had suggested I set up in my name to maximize the grant, though the account benefited their household budget far more than it affected mine. Then, the Interact transfers became automatic. Hydro, internet, 2 car payments, my daughter-in-law's business expenses for the lifestyle brand she ran on Instagram, my grandchildren's extracurricular programs, the cleaner who came every second Thursday, a meal kit subscription, streaming services, a gym membership for her, dental work that their benefits plan did not cover, a family trip to Kelowna in the spring that I had not been invited to join, but had partially funded, without fully understanding that until I saw the receipt, she had accidentally forwarded to my email. I counted every line. 94 active transfers and recurring payments. I sat back in my chair and looked at the ceiling. 94 ways I had quietly kept their life at a level they had come to believe was simply the level life operated at. My son made a good salary. My daughter-in-law ran her brand, which brought in inconsistent income but presented very consistently on social media. Together, if I added only what I knew about, they earned more in a year than I had ever earned at any point in my career. And yet, without my contributions, their lifestyle would not hold. I looked around my own kitchen. The dishwasher had been making a sound for 8 months that I kept meaning to have looked at. My winter coat was 6 years old and had a small tear along the left cuff I had sewn closed twice. My CPP and OAS combined came to just over $1,900 a month, which I stretched carefully because I had made choices over the years that had been good for my son's future and less considerate of my own retirement savings. Start building a life that does not revolve around us. I closed the binder. The sound of it closing felt like something I could not name precisely but recognized completely. In the morning, I called the bank before I made coffee. I banked with TD and had for over 20 years. My advisor there was a woman named Patricia, calm and thorough, the kind of person who understood that sometimes the most significant financial decisions are also the most personal ones. I asked for an appointment that same day. She fit me in at 11. I arrived with the binder under my arm and sat across from her in the glass-walled office near the back of the branch. Patricia had a cup of tea on her desk and offered me one. I accepted it because my hands needed something to do. I told her I needed to cancel every automatic transfer linked to my son's household, all of them, immediately. She looked at the list I had prepared. Her expression did not change much, but I could see her reading carefully, going through each line. She turned a page, then another. "This is substantial," she said quietly. "I know. Some of these are set up as recurring pre-authorized debits from their end," she said. "Those will require a different process." "What process?" "A formal cancellation request. I can initiate it from our side and flag any that require their service providers to be contacted directly. It may take 48 hours for some to fully stop, but we can put a block on the transfers and flag any that come through in the meantime." "Do that," I said. She typed steadily for several minutes. I drank my tea and looked out the window at the parking lot and the gray October sky beyond it. Then Patricia stopped typing. "Dorothy," she said, using my name carefully, "I need to show you something." She turned her screen slightly toward me. There was a flag notification from 2 weeks prior. A request had been made to update the authorized contacts on my investment account, the one I had opened in the 90s and added to whenever I had anything extra. It was not enormous, but it was mine, built slowly and carefully over decades. The request had listed my daughter-in-law's name as an additional authorized party. The request was flagged automatically because the supporting documentation submitted had inconsistencies, Patricia said. We put it on hold pending your confirmation. We sent a letter to your address. I thought about the letter. I thought about how my daughter-in-law handled the mail sometimes when she visited, how she would set things on the counter and say she had brought it in from the box, being helpful. I never received a letter, I said. Patricia's expression was carefully neutral, in the way that professionals become carefully neutral when they understand the full weight of what they are saying. We can issue a fraud alert on your accounts today and require in-person verification for any future changes. We can also revoke any third-party access that has been granted and update all security protocols. My breath came out slowly, like something that had been held too long. This had not been carelessness. This had not been my daughter-in-law forgetting where the line was. This was planning. This was preparation for something I had not seen coming, though some part of me, the part that had kept a binder with careful handwriting, had apparently known to document everything. Do all of it, I said. Every security measure you have. Patricia nodded and returned to her keyboard. When I left the bank, the cold air felt different than it had on the way in. Less like something pressing against me, and more like something clearing the path. The first message arrived before I had reached the highway. It came through as an Interact notification alert, which meant the transfer my daughter-in-law had scheduled for Thursday had been returned. Her message came 11 minutes after that. It was polite, in the way that only people who are very worried tend to be polite suddenly. Hi, just seeing a notification that a transfer didn't go through. Probably just a banking glitch. Can you check when you get a chance? I put my phone in my bag and drove. By the time I arrived home, there were 4 more messages. The tone had shifted through them like weather moving in, starting mild and moving steadily toward something less mild. The internet provider had sent an interruption notice. The gym membership had sent a failed payment alert, which my daughter-in-law had apparently forwarded to me with a question mark. The cleaner had messaged to say her e-transfer had bounced, and could I resend? My son's first message came at 2:30. Mom, something is wrong with the transfers. A bunch of things are showing declined. Can you call me? Then, 20 minutes later, Mom, this is actually a problem. The car payment didn't go through. Please call. Then, an hour after that, a longer message. The kind typed quickly by someone whose thoughts were outrunning their ability to organize them. He listed the things that had failed: the utilities, the car, the cleaner, the children's skating program registration, the meal kit. He used the phrase, "This is creating chaos," twice. He did not ask if I was all right. He did not ask why. He asked me to fix it. I made myself dinner. Leftover lentil soup and toast. I ate at the kitchen table and watched the light fade outside the window over the sink. When I was finished, I washed my bowl and left my phone on the counter face down. There is a particular kind of peace that comes not from the absence of difficulty, but from the decision to stop managing it for people who are capable of managing themselves. I had not known that peace in a long time. I sat in the living room and found it settling around me like something I had forgotten I was allowed to have. My daughter-in-law's message came at 9:47 that evening. I want to be direct with you. I do not know what you think you are doing, but pulling support without any warning or conversation is manipulative and immature. We have obligations. We have children. If you are trying to make a point, you have made it. Now please fix this before it escalates. I read it once. I set the phone down. I did not reply. The next morning, my son's car was in my driveway before I had finished breakfast. I heard him before I saw him, the particular energy of a person who has been awake most of the night, running through outcomes, and has arrived somewhere between desperate and furious, and not entirely sure which one to lead with. I opened the door before he knocked. He looked tired. He was wearing the jacket I had bought him 2 birthdays ago. The charcoal one with the collar he said was comfortable, though I noticed he had not mentioned it since. He stood in the doorway for a moment and then came inside because I stepped back to let him, and because he had grown up in this house and still moved through it like he belonged here, even when his life had moved somewhere else. "Sit down," I said. He sat at the kitchen table. I put the kettle on because it was something to do, and because I needed a moment to be standing with my back to him. "Mom, what is happening?" he said. Everything stopped. The bills, the transfers, everything. "I have been trying to reach you." "I know," I said. "Then why didn't you answer?" I turned around. "Because I needed to think before I spoke. That is something I have been trying to do more of." He looked at me in the way adult children sometimes look at parents, when the parent says something the child does not have an immediate response to. I set the binder on the table. "This is what has been happening," I said, "for the last 2 years, and in smaller ways for several years before that." He opened it. I watched his eyes move across the first page. He turned to the second. I could see him starting to understand the scope of it, not all at once, but in the way that a person understands something they have been successfully not looking at for a long time. "I didn't realize it was this much," he said finally. "I know you didn't," I said. "That was part of the problem. Mom, your daughter-in-law told me on Sunday evening that I needed to start building a life that didn't revolve around you, that the energy I brought was pressure, that it felt like you owed me something." I let that sit between us for a moment. She said this on the doorstep of a house whose furnishings I helped pay for, whose roof assessment I contributed to last spring, while driving a car whose payments are in that binder. I stood there holding butter tarts I had made from my mother's recipe, and she closed the door. The color in his face changed. "Mom, I didn't know she was going to." "She also attempted to add herself as an authorized contact on my investment account," I said. "The bank flagged it. I found out yesterday." The silence that followed was a different kind than before. It was the silence of something structural giving way. "She—" "What?" "2 weeks ago. The documentation she submitted had inconsistencies, so the bank put it on hold and sent me a letter. The letter did not arrive." I watched his face move through several things. "I am not telling you this to cause a crisis. I am telling you because you deserve to know what you have been standing next to." He pressed both hands flat on the table, the way he used to do as a teenager when he was trying to hold himself steady. "I didn't know about that. I swear to you I had no idea." "I believe you," I said, and I did. The kettle clicked off. I poured 2 cups and sat across from him. For a while neither of us said anything. "We can't cover everything on our own," he said at last. "Not right now. Not at the level we have commitments. The kids' programs, the house, the Kelowna trip," I said quietly. He stopped. "I found the forwarded receipt," I said. "I am not angry about the trip. I want to be clear about that. I am telling you so you understand I know the full picture. You can afford a trip to Kelowna. You can afford a cleaner. What you cannot afford, apparently, is to pay for those things yourself and also live the way you have been living. And what I am telling you is that that calculation is no longer something I am available to solve." He looked down at his hands. Something in the set of his shoulders reminded me of the boy he used to be, not the posture of that boy exactly, but the particular quality of stillness that meant he was actually listening instead of waiting for a pause so he could speak. "Your father and I split when you were 9, I said. "I worked 31 years of nights and weekends and overtime and doublebacks. My retirement is what I managed to save around the edges of giving you a life I was proud of. I am not angry that I did that. I would do it again. But I am 64 years old with a dishwasher that makes a noise and a winter coat with a sewn cuff, and I was told on Sunday by a woman whose gym membership I have been paying that I bring too much pressure to a room. So I am done. Not done with you, because you are my son, and that is not a thing I know how to stop. But done with the transfers, done with the automatic support, done with quietly funding a lifestyle that has not left room for mine. He was quiet for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were red at the edges. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not the kind of sorry that is a reflex, the kind that means a person has heard something and cannot unhear it." "I know," I said. He left an hour later without asking me to reverse anything. That, more than anything else, told me something had shifted. The days that followed had the feeling of something large and slow settling into a new position. I heard things through my neighbor, Jean, who had a talent for knowing what was happening on streets adjacent to her own. The lease on one of the cars had been returned. A landscaping service that had been coming every 2 weeks had been canceled. My daughter-in-law had posted less on her social media, and what she did post had a different quality to it, less curated, slightly frantic around the edges, the way things look when the infrastructure holding them up has quietly been removed. My granddaughter came to see me on a Wednesday afternoon. She was in her 2nd year at Georgian College and had her mother's coloring but nothing else of her mother about her, at least not in the ways that mattered. She knocked rather than ringing the doorbell, which was her habit, and when I opened the door she was holding a paper bag from the Tim Hortons on the corner with 2 large double-doubles inside. "I thought you might want company," she said. I stepped back and let her in. We sat at the kitchen table with the coffee, and she told me she had seen the binder when her father had come home from my house. He had left it on the counter, and she had picked it up before anyone said not to. She had read through enough of it to understand what she was looking at. "I didn't know," she said. "I mean, I knew you helped sometimes. I thought it was like occasional. I didn't know it was all of that." "It grew gradually," I said. "Things like that usually do." She wrapped both hands around her cup, the way young people do when they are trying to look older than they feel. "Mom is really upset. Like, not sad upset. More like scrambling upset. She keeps saying you're punishing them, that you're doing it to control them." "What do you think?" I asked. She looked at me directly, which I had always liked about her. She had never been someone who looked away when a question was real. "I think she's scared. And I think she's been scared for a while, and you were the thing keeping that from being obvious." I felt the truth of that settle somewhere in my chest. "I also found something," she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, turned it to show me. There were photographs, documents bearing my name and address, loan application forms partially filled in, a refinancing outline with a property listed that I recognized as mine, my daughter-in-law's handwriting on several annotations in the margins. I looked at the screen, and then I looked at my granddaughter. "Where did you find these?" "Mom's home office." The door was open, and I heard her on the phone saying she needed to move faster before anything else got locked down. I took photos of everything. She held the phone steadily, her chin set. "Grandma, I think she was planning to refinance something using your name. I don't fully understand the legal part, but it looked like she had been working on it for a while." I took the phone gently from her hand and looked through each photograph. The documents were further along than I might have hoped. This had not been an impulsive idea. This had been planned with the careful patience of someone who had always assumed the opportunity would remain available. I handed her back the phone. "Can you send those to me?" "Already did," she said. I looked at this young woman sitting across from me and thought about how easy it would be to become your surroundings, how the house you grow up in shapes the person you think is normal to be, and how remarkable it was that she had grown up inside something and refused to become it. "I work at the climbing gym on weekends now," she said, almost shyly. "I pay for my own bus pass and my textbooks. I'm saving for a laptop. It's not a lot, but it's mine." "That is everything," I said. Her eyes went shiny for a moment. She blinked it away quickly. I don't want to be the kind of person who does what she does. I wanted you to know that." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. We sat like that for a while, with our coffees going slightly cold between us and the October light coming through the window at the angle it only comes through in October, slanted and golden and a little sad. After she left, I called a lawyer. Not a relative, not someone through a friend of a friend. An actual estate and financial lawyer, whose name I found through the Law Society of Ontario's referral service. I had an appointment for the following Monday. I brought the photographs my granddaughter had sent me, and every document in my green binder, and sat across from a man who listened without interrupting, and then told me clearly and without softening it what I was looking at and what my options were. He recommended a cease and desist regarding the unauthorized account access attempts. He helped me review and update my power of attorney documentation. He advised me on how to properly secure my property title. He told me the refinancing scheme, had it proceeded, would have been difficult and costly for me to untangle. He used the word fraudulent twice without being asked to characterize it. I left his office feeling the particular kind of tired that comes after doing something important that you have been putting off without knowing you were putting it off. On the drive home, I stopped at a clothing store near the highway and bought myself a winter coat. Deep burgundy, wool blend, warm enough that I would not feel the cold through it the way I had last February. I also bought a scarf, soft and long, in a color between green and gray that I had always liked on myself, but somehow never allowed to become a purchase. I wore the scarf home over my old coat, which I planned to donate, and I thought about how small a thing it was and how large it felt. The following week settled into something I had not felt in so long. I had almost stopped believing it existed for me. Routine, but a routine that was mine. I began swimming again at the community center on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, something I had stopped doing years ago when the schedule of other people's needs had folded my own habits out of the week. I joined a book club that met on the second Wednesday of each month in the back room of the library. I baked butter tarts on a Sunday just because I wanted them, and ate 3 of them at my own kitchen table while reading a novel I had bought at the airport 2 years ago and never opened. My son kept his word about coming. He called ahead, which was new, and asked if it was all right to bring the children one Saturday afternoon. I said yes, and made hot chocolate. And we sat around the table and my grandchildren told me about their week with the unfiltered energy that children have when they are in a place where nothing is being performed. My son washed the cups afterward. He did not ask me for anything. Neither did I. My daughter-in-law did not come. My son did not offer an explanation, and I did not ask for one. Some things find their own level when you stop arranging them. One evening, about 6 weeks after the Sunday in October, my son stayed after the children had gone to wait in the car. He stood in my entryway with his hands in his pockets, looking at the coat hooks on the wall, which still had his old hockey bag hanger on it from when he was 12. "Things are tight," he said. "Really tight. We had to restructure some things. Make some calls we should have made a long time ago." A pause. "She is not handling it well." "I imagine not," I said. "She says you did this to punish her." I considered that. "Do you believe that?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I think you did this because you had to, because I let things go on too long without paying attention to what they actually were." He looked at me then, directly. "I'm sorry I didn't look closer. I'm sorry about Sunday. I should have called you after. I should have called you that night." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more and was still learning how. That was all right. Learning how takes time. I, of all people, understood that. "Can we keep coming on Saturdays?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He hugged me briefly. The way men who have been raised to be strong and have recently been humbled, tend to hug their mothers. A little longer than they mean to, a little tighter than they planned. After he drove away, I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window in the living room. The street was quiet, the sky was dark, the neighbors' lights were warm behind their curtains. I thought about what it means to love someone, as opposed to what it means to fund them. I thought about how long I had confused one for the other, or allowed the confusion to persist, because ending it would require a conversation I did not know how to start. I thought about my granddaughter sitting at my kitchen table with a Tim Hortons cup and a phone full of photographs and the clearest eyes I had seen in a long time. I thought about all the things I had postponed, the dishwasher repair which I had finally scheduled, the trip to Cape Breton I had been meaning to take since the year my mother died, the watercolor class at the rec center that met on Friday evenings, and had had space available for 3 months, while I had been busy routing money away from my own life and into the smooth surface of someone else's. I had registered for the class the week before. The first session was next Friday. I got up and found the butter tarts I had saved in the container on the counter, the last 2. I brought them back to the chair by the window and ate them slowly in the quiet, watching the street through the glass. There is something that happens when you stop arranging your life around the comfort of people who have never once arranged theirs around yours. It is not dramatic. There is no music. Nothing about it looks from the outside the way it feels from the inside. From the outside, it probably looks like a woman in a good coat, sitting in a warm house, eating a butter tart. From the inside, it feels like finally coming home to a place you built yourself and have been giving away the keys to for years. I finished the last tart. I washed the container, put it in the cupboard, and went to bed without setting an alarm for the first time in longer than I could remember. In the morning, I would wake up when I woke up. I would make coffee. I would call about the Cape Breton trip. I would do all of it without asking anyone's permission and without rearranging my life around what it cost them for me to simply be in it. That, I had finally learned, is not selfishness. That is what it looks like to love yourself the way you should have been loved all along.